Part 28. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 271. Feeling the boundless killing power, Zuyun subconsciously wanted to use the talisman for defense, but he immediately thought that the talisman could only be used 3 times, and this 10-directional killing formation had 10 killing moves. No. Zuyun made a quick decision and took out 9 spiritual stones directly from the storage bag. Before the killing moves hit his face one after another, the 9 spiritual stones quickly bloomed with spiritual power. A strange color flashed in Tang Tiangong's eyes, and his face was full of surprise. He boasted that he was superior in the formation, and no one could match him in the past and present. However, he did not expect that Zuyun's reaction and formation speed were not weak at all. Moreover, he had never seen the formation used by Zuyun before. 9 revolutions and 9 suns formation. As Zuyun drank, the spiritual power emitted by the 9 spiritual stones quickly merged into one, and the 9 turn 9 yang formation quickly took shape. 9 suns hung above the head, facing 9 murderous auras respectively. As for the last murderous intent, Zuyun stabbed it with his sword. The most common move is to release the sword energy. 10 murderous auras were cancelled out one after another in an instant. After only hearing a burst of noise, the killing array became silent, and Tang Tiangong's voice came to Zuyun's ears. What formation is this? Compared to Zuyun's extraordinary sword energy, Tang Tiangong's interest was completely attracted by the 9 turns and 9 suns formation. He was obsessed with formations and only had formations in his eyes. The 9 turn 9 yang formation was taught by my master. Zuyun took back his sword and said seriously, "My master is from the 7-star sect." He said this deliberately to deal with Tang Tiangong's previous words of looking down on the 7-star sect. 7-star gate? The 7-star gate actually has such a formation. Sure enough, a look of admiration flashed in Tang Tiangong's eyes, and then he said with a smile, "This 9 turns and 9 suns formation has many changes. Little friend Joe, I think you only used one change." At this time, Tang felt like a cat in his heart. "Hey, I wonder if I can let Tang have a look." Zuyun hesitated. Although Sun Suanhua never said that this formation could not be spread outside, he thought that Sun Suanhua was in Chuzhu and Tang Tiangang could even understand the teleportation formation. If this formation was unlocked. Ha ha ha, seeing Zuyun's expression, Tang Tiangang knew what he was thinking, and said, "If it's inconvenient for little friend Joe, then forget it. However, if there is a chance in the future, I must help Tang introduce you master. Tang is willing to use this 10 directions killing formation in exchange." Seeing Tang Tiangong's interest, Zuyun was even more cautious. He thought to himself, wasn't Li Mo here just to find the formation master? Just to break the formation hidden in Liwo sect. If he really can't find Sun Suanhua, then taking Tang Tiangang there seems to be a feasible way. It's just that Tang Tiangang is a cautious person, so he can only persuade him as much as he can. Not to mention leaving the fire sect, just leaving Xian city is also difficult. After all, it is still related to one's own strength. As long as Tang Tiangang can be protected, this is a good idea. After Zuyun put this idea in his heart, he smiled at Tang Tiangang and said, "It's easy to say. My master also likes the formation. I think I can definitely talk to City Lord Tang." Tang Tiangang was overjoyed. He had reached the level of complete obsession with the Tao of Battle, and the 9 turns and 9 suns formation was completely different from the formations he knew. Of course, as long as the formation is large, it is all artificially set up, and it always uses spiritual stones to set up the formation eyes, and then uses spiritual power to drive it. What's more, Tang Tiangang has studied formation patterns all his life. It's not that he can't understand this formation, but he can't see other changes in this formation. After this battle, Tang Tiangang no longer had any thoughts of testing. Instead, he opened up the chat box about the formation and talked about some of his understanding of the formation, which actually benefited Zuyun a lot. As he talked, he mentioned the previous 5 elements exorcism array, and Zuyun immediately cheered up. Young friend Joe, I learned this formation accidentally, and it's not of much use. After all, under the nascent soul, how many times can a monk encounter inner demons? Tang Tiangang said. Zuyun nodded and smiled, that's true, but this 5 elements exorcism array is interesting. I wonder how City Lord Tang realized it? Ha ha ha, Tang Tiangang laughed loudly and said, Zhou Xiao, your funny words directly hit Tang's heart. It's a coincidence that if my Scarlet Flame City didn't have the 5 elements exorcism array, it wouldn't be able to 100 years after the city was founded, it developed rapidly. Hearing this, Zuyun raised his eyebrows. Just now he said it was of little use, but now his next sentence was related to Scarlet Flame City. You also know, Tang, I have no spiritual roots and have no understanding of the 5 attributes of spiritual power. As far as I am concerned, as long as it is spiritual power, it is the same. But one day, a man in the foundation building stage, the monk, suddenly went crazy in Xian City, killing people and killing animals. At that time, there were no monks in the Scarlet Flame City, so he was allowed to go on a killing spree in the city. Is it the inner demon? Zuyun asked quickly. It's not that. Tang Tiangang poured Zuyun a cup of tea and said, it's that the 10,000 demons art failed, and the demon power in his body suppressed the spiritual power. When he goes completely crazy, he will turn into a demon beast. When I arrived at that time, he had turned into a half-demon. I could only use the spirit stones to trap him and then kill him. The original formation was the 5-party trapping formation that I had newly researched. The 5 elements were not involved, but I never thought that 5 colors of light suddenly burst out of the man's half-demon body and jumped into the 5 spiritual stones. Immediately, the man stopped demonizing, but did not return to his human form. Of course, I know that this formation has no such effect, and I can't understand the mystery of such a change. So he sent someone to bring the half-demon monk into the city lord's palace. He continued to be trapped in the 5-party trapping formation and began to study. But he couldn't find it until one day, a monk came and said that it was the half-demon monk. Is his twin brother? After careful questioning, I immediately understood. Because, that half-demon monk turned out to have 5 spiritual roots. Upon hearing this, Zuyun's heart jumped suddenly. Because I also have 5 spiritual roots. Tang Tiangang continued, I thought to myself, what does the 5 spiritual roots have to do with my 5 square trap formation? The monk begged me to return his brother to him, but I wanted to find out the secret, so I told him, I am looking for a way to recover his brother and let him stay in the city to wait for the news. Indeed, after several years of research, I finally realized that the 5 elements are the most important thing, which is the word balance, so I created this 5-element exorcism array. Not only can it exorcise inner demons, but it can also prevent the failure of practicing the 10,000 demon art. The demonized monk will no longer become a demon. Zuyun somewhat understood that there were many monks in Scarlet Flame City, and more of them must be monks practicing the 10,000 demons art. The reason why they gathered here must be because they had a chance of survival. What if he turned into a demon and Tang Tiangang used the 5 elements exorcism array for him? Wouldn't this save one's life? He even speculated that the people under him might be working for him because of the 5 elements exorcism array. Zuyun doesn't care about this. What he cares about is whether he can get the 5 elements exorcism array. After thinking for a moment, Zuyun prepared his words and said, this 5 elements exorcism array is so mysterious. Since City Lord Tang said it is of little use, why not? Before he finished speaking, Tang Tiangang interrupted him with a smile and said, little friend Joe, do you want the 5 elements exorcist array? Okay, then I'll pass it on to you. So generous? Zuyun didn't expect Tang Tiangang to be so easy to talk to. He had previously said that he would give him the 10 directions killing formation in exchange for the 9 turns and 9 yang formation. However, since he is willing to teach, Zuyun is also happy to accept it. So he sat down carefully and listened to Tang Tiangang explain in detail the arrangement of the formation, key points to pay attention to, and the tactics of controlling the formation. Zuyun originally practiced the 5 elements Chaos Sutra, which was similar to the 5 elements exorcism formation. He understood it very quickly, and Tang Tiangang couldn't help but be surprised for a while. By the time all the key points of this formation were finished, it was already bright outside. Little friend Joe, Tang Tiangang stood up and said meaningfully, otherwise, it's better to stop practicing. There's no future in that. You'd better learn the Tao of formation with me. Zuyun was dumbfounded, and then said, if I don't practice anymore, how can I help City Lord Tang enter the demon refining tower? Look at my head. Tang Tiangang laughed loudly, patted his forehead, and said, what little friend Joe said is that you and I are different. You have already reached the late stage of foundation building. If you continue to focus on the formation path, you may be neglecting the basics. Zuyun breathed a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that Tang Tiangang would take a fancy to him and make him his apprentice. That would be troublesome. The previous killing array from all directions left him still frightened. He knew that if Tang Tiangang continued to use that formation to attack, he could block it for a while, but not forever. When the spiritual power is used up, there will be no resistance left. Even if he takes the initiative to attack Tang Tiangang, he has no confidence at all. But fortunately, Tang Tiangang placed his hope in him and there was no hostility. City Lord Tang, now that the property has returned to its original owner, it's time for me to leave. It was impossible for Zuyun to tell Tang Tiangang the purpose of his coming here. With his vengeful and suspicious temperament, he was afraid of some conflict with the Luo sect. Look at what Li Mo said, his father wouldn't let him talk to strangers. Little friend Joe, please come when you have time after practicing. Scarlet Flame City welcomes you. With that said, he took out a token from his arms and threw it over, saying, One formation order, as long as you are in Scarlet Flame City, no formation can stop you. Zuyun was overjoyed. It seemed that the formation in Scarlet Flame City was all set up by Tang Tiangang. In terms of array formation, his strength is indeed terrifying. Then I'll say goodbye. Tang Tiangang sent Zuyun to the door. Before opening the door, Zuyun said goodbye to Tang Tiangang. Then, he pushed open the door and strode out. But half of his body was still in the city lord's palace, and a sword light suddenly struck him, pointing directly at his throat. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 272. It's that middle Jindan realm. Zuyun was horrified. He could never have imagined that someone was still alive. Could it be that those monsters were full, so they let him survive? But why didn't he run away after surviving? He stayed here to wait for me. What's going on? Zuyun didn't have time to think about it. He took out the talisman and went to meet him. Boom. Zuyun felt very distressed. He had planned to use this talisman in the Peepa realm, but now, there were only 2 times left. He stepped back into the city lord's house, and then glared at the middle Jindan realm that was shaken away. Boy, hand over your magic weapon, and I will spare your life. Otherwise, I will wait here until you come out. The Jindan realm stabilized his body, but his breath was a little disordered, and his eyes were fixed on the door of the city lord's house. The door was not closed, and Zuyun looked at him. Tang Tiangang stepped forward and said, Friend Zhou, do you want me to help you? Zuyun wanted to say that he would be more than happy to help, but then he thought that if he asked Tang Tiangang to help, he would owe him a favor. Thinking of this, Zuyun shook his head and said, No need to trouble City Lord Tang. Tang Tiangang was stunned and said in disbelief, Friend Zhou, do you want to kill that Jindan stage? I am in the foundation building stage, how can I kill a Jindan stage? Zhu Yun did not want to show his strength, and of course he did not let Tang Tiangang take action, and he had his own plan. Lord Tang, it seems that you can only use your teleportation array to teleport me to Tang's Inn. Tang Tiangang frowned and said, Friend Zhou, teleportation is not difficult, but if this Jindan stage is targeting you, even if you are safe in Tang's Inn, what about going out? Lord Tang, how could this Jindan stage think that I would appear in Tang's wine house? When I meet up with my friends, I will quickly leave Xian City. By the time he reacts, I am afraid I will be thousands of miles away. As long as he doesn't fight in Xian City, Zhu Yun is naturally not afraid. Outside the Lord's mansion, Tang Tiangang is confident that he can take down this middle stage Jindan. Who knows how many formations there are in Xian City? What if he reveals his trump card and Tang Tiangang doesn't let him go, but forces him to go to the demon refining tower? This is what Zhu Yun is worried about. But it was obvious that Tang Tiangang was still afraid that something might happen to Zhu Yun, so he shook his head and said, My dear Zhou, in my opinion, you should stay in the city lord's mansion for a while. After a while, this Jindan stage will leave on its own if it can't wait for you to come. Even if he keeps waiting here, what about the next beast tide? Zhu Yun cursed in his heart, but he couldn't show it on his face. He could only make up a reason and said, City Lord Tang, I have to rush back to the place of cultivation as soon as possible, otherwise my master will be worried. Having said this, and Zhu Yun had previously promised to bring Sun Suanhua to discuss the formation with him, Tang Tiangang had no choice but to agree. Then he closed the door and took Zhu Yun to the other side of the hall. My dear Zhou, when you see your master, ask him to come to Xian City as soon as possible. Zhu Yun responded casually until he entered a small room. The room was empty, with only a formation engraved on the ground. The array pattern was extremely complicated, but Zhu Yun could also vaguely see the shadow of the teleportation array on the barren stone mountain at that time. In comparison, this array was much simpler. Also, that array could teleport a state, but this array could only teleport a city. There was no way to compare them at all. Friend Yun, please stand up, and remember not to move around. At most 3 breaths, you will be able to appear on the bottom floor of Tang's tavern. Tang Tiangang reminded him, and Zhu Yun quickly came back to his senses. Then he saw Tang Tiangang waved his hand, and the array pattern under his feet flashed countless brilliance in an instant. He took a quick look and found that only 1/10 of the array patterns were lit, and the other 9/10 were not lit. He thought about it, and said in his heart that different array patterns must control different teleportation locations. While thinking in his mind, Zhu Yun suddenly felt that his eyes darkened, and then he was in darkness. But after 3 breaths, his eyes lit up, and he was already in a completely unfamiliar place. It's really mysterious. But, I don't feel any pain. Zhu Yun was a little surprised. Tang Tiangong's array art was indeed very advanced. But he guessed that it was probably because of the short transmission distance. In his understanding, the pain in his body was probably caused by the tearing of the space force during the transmission process. Zhu Yun looked around. Tang Tiangang said that he would be teleported to the basement. Now it seems that it is true. Yes, there is no need for him to lie to himself now. After walking a few steps, Zhu Yun found a staircase and walked up directly. He only felt that the 10,000 array order in his hand was lit, and it seemed that he had passed through an array. Zhu Yun felt amazing. This 10,000 array order looked simple, like an array plate. It might be used in the entire Xian city, but he couldn't make it out. After leaving the basement, Zhu Yun appeared in the lobby of the inn. However, behind the screen of the counter, beside him was the stone sculpture monster. This was the first time Zhu Yun observed the stone sculpture at such a close distance, So he couldn't help but take a second look. Who would have thought that he could see some clues just like this? This stone sculpture is very lifelike. Not only is it very similar to a real monster, Zuyun can also faintly sense the surge of monster power. Just as he was about to get closer, he suddenly heard the waiter's exclamation. Daiyu, when did you come back, and why are you behind the screen? Zuyun quickly looked away, smiled slightly, and said, I just came back. After saying that, he walked forward as if nothing had happened. Tang Tiangang said arrogantly that anyone with a Tang family sign can come through the teleportation array. Presumably the monks in these places are all his. Zuyun was afraid of being tipped off, even though he had not done anything extraordinary. The stairs leading to the upper floor of the inn were on the other side. Zuyun went straight up and reached number 3 Suanzi. This time, there was no need to get the array key. He pushed the door open and saw Li Mo slowly opening his eyes on the bed. Fellow Daoist Joe, seeing that you are in high spirits, you probably went to a brothel to drink wine, right? Zuyun was speechless, then smiled and said, no way, the beast tide almost scared me to death last night. This morning, I saw that the beast tide receded, so I hurriedly came to find you. Let's go back to Liwo sect quickly. What? Beast tide? Li Mo was shocked and almost fell off the bed. That's right, Beast Dynasty, if you don't believe it, take a look. Zuyun pushed open the window, and the smell of blood hit his face. The floor was covered with broken limbs, coagulated blood, and various remnants burned by the demonic fire. This. Li Mo's legs were trembling. He had heard about the beast tide in Scarlet Flame City for a long time in Li Huo sect, but it didn't happen every night. Originally, I only planned to stay here for one night, and take Zuyun to play for a whole day before leaving the next day. But now, on the street, it was shocking and desolate. Not to mention that you still dare to stay, even if you play, the previous lively atmosphere will be gone. Let's go quickly. Li Mo quickly got off the bed and walked quickly outside the house. Zuyun secretly guessed whether it was because the inn's formation, like the one in the city lord's mansion, could isolate all atmosphere and momentum, or whether it was because Li Moxin was too big. He didn't even know there was such a big movement in the outside world. He followed Li Mo to the counter on the first floor, returned the array key to the waiter, and the room was considered to be vacated. He didn't want to stay for a moment, so he rushed to the city gate where he came from. This place is at least 5 miles away from the city lord's palace, and Zuyun is not afraid of being discovered by the mid-stage pill-forming master. Come to think of it, during the pill-forming period, I would have thought that Zuyun was hiding in the city lord's mansion. As the two people went out, the shops on both sides of the street also opened their doors one after another. What puzzled Zuyun was that the waiters in the shop were all sweeping blood in front of the door, seemingly in good order. It seems that Tang Tiangang has left almost everything to these shops. Whether it's risk or otherwise. As the waiter in the shop walked to the street, some monks who were lucky enough to escape the beast wave also dared to go out. Seeing the hell-like tragic situation, everyone had a look of joy on their faces for surviving the disaster. On the contrary, the waiters, as if they had seen the scene before, remained calm and composed. The city defense formation once again enveloped Qian City at some unknown time, and the guards at the city walls and gates were still there. Even more monks appeared outside the city in 2s and 3s, entering the city one after another. Li Mo was anxious and walked faster than Zuyun, walking out of the city gate ahead of him. The city defense formation only blocks entry, not exit, and is left unattended. But just as Zuyun followed Li Mo and stepped out of the city gate, the 10,000 formation tokens in his arms suddenly lit up, immediately attracting everyone's attention. Several guards all looked at it, not to mention the monks waiting at the door to enter the city. Fellow Taoist, please wait a moment. A guard wearing slightly different clothes squeezed out of the city and stopped in front of Zuyun. What's the matter? Zhu Yun's eyes narrowed and he said in a deep voice. You are showing a strange appearance, and as the leader of the guards at the south gate of Scarlet Flame City, I naturally have the responsibility to interrogate you. Please come with me, so that there will be no more people talking here. As he said that, he made a gesture of invitation, but a look of greed flashed in his eyes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 273. The city guard thought Zhu Yun couldn't find it, but he didn't expect that Zhu Yun's soul strength was far beyond that of an ordinary foundation building period. Li Mo saw that Zhu Yun was stopped, but he didn't think much about it, thinking that he was really interrogating. He didn't want to make trouble, so he took the initiative to walk in front of the city guard and whispered, "This senior, we just stayed here yesterday and will leave this morning, that's all." He took out a storage bag and handed it over respectfully. He remembered that some disciples in the sect, when asking others to do things, would take spirit stones or resources to open the way. However, Zhu Yun cursed in his heart, "It's okay if you don't give it to me, but if you give it to me, you're going to die." Sure enough, the Jindan period's spiritual consciousness was clear, and he found that there were actually 1,000 spirit stones in the storage bag, and his eyes immediately straightened up. How could he not know that Li Mo wanted him to open a back door? But Zhu Yun had a rare treasure in his arms, and it was outside the city. Even if the city lord Tang Tiangang found out that he had done such a robbery, what could he do to him? Ha ha ha, so that's how it is. The Jindan stage had no more worries in his heart. He smiled heartily and patted Zhu Yun on the shoulder and said, "Then leave quickly. The beast tied in the city last night didn't scare you." Zhu Yun was slightly stunned, but immediately understood that the Jindan stage would probably wait until the two of them were far away before taking action. But Li Mo was unaware of it. He thought he had helped Zhu Yun. After thanking the Jindan stage, he pulled Zhu Yun away and even winked at Zhu Yun, feeling very satisfied. Zhu Yun had already scolded Li Mo in his heart. If he wanted to escape, he could use the flying boat. But ordinary Jindan stage people don't have this magic weapon. It would be too conspicuous for him, a foundation building stage person, to take it out. Moreover, the fastest speed of the flying boat is only similar to that of the Jindan stage. If he escapes under the eyes of the city guard at this time, if he keeps chasing him for 1,000 miles, he will be chased to the Luo sect. By then, I am afraid that I will be captured by the Luo sect first. So at this time, even though Zhu Yun felt helpless, he could only fly south with Li Mo as if he left Qian City normally. Li Mo was like a bee, talking non-stop in Zhu Yun's ear, and Zhu Yun was so angry that he wanted to slap him to shut him up. It's really a headache. Zhu Yun was speechless in his heart. Li Mo was still very useful, but now he couldn't beat him or scold him. If it wasn't for Sun Suanhua, how could he be willing to swallow his anger? Fellow Daoist Joe, you look like someone owes you spirit stones. It's okay, I don't care about 1,000 or 800 yuan. In the air, Li Mo kept chattering, and finally found that Zhu Yun didn't pay any attention to him. Looking carefully, he found that Zhu Yun's expression was solemn. He thought he wanted to return his spirit stones, so he pretended to be relaxed. Zhu Yun was amused, but quickly frowned and said in a deep voice, "You shouldn't have given the spirit stones to the city guard just now. If I don't give it to him, will I return it to you?" Li Mo waved his hand casually and said, "You don't feel sorry for the spirit stones, do you?" Zhu Yun rolled his eyes. Li Mo's brain. Fellow Daoist Joe, which is more important, spirit stones or life? The city guard is in the Jindan stage. What if he is unhappy with you and beats you up? You won't have a place to cry. Li Mo said to him in the tone of an experienced person. Zuyun didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and said, he was blackmailing me by relying on his high realm, but you gave him another 1,000 spirit stones. Now we are in trouble. I was thinking, should we change direction and take a detour back to Liwo sect? Impossible. Li Emo glared, pointed at his temple and said, is there something wrong with you? I gave him spirit stones, and he let you go, and he hasn't chased me yet, so where is the trouble? As he said that, he looked back. Xian City was still visible, but no one could be seen flying here. Not even one. Look, no one is chasing us. Let me tell you, problems that can be solved with spirit stones are not problems. So, I gave him spirit stones directly, otherwise, how could you come out so easily? Li Emo talked for a while, and seeing that Zuyun still had an ugly expression, he couldn't help but feel bored, and stopped talking to him, flying on his own. But Zuyun was thinking about what Li Emo said. Indeed, his insight, let alone in the world of immortal cultivation, is an extremely unwise move even among mortals. Wealth should not be exposed. Otherwise, it will definitely attract the greed of others. The Jindan stage, without seeing the Wanzan order in his arms, thought it was a treasure, and could be tempted, not to mention that Li Emo took out a valuable spirit stone. But it was indeed as he said, why didn't the Jindan stage chase him? He believed that since he could not see the people of Xian City, the people of Xian City could not see him either, not to mention that the spiritual consciousness of the Jindan stage could not scan this place and discover him. Or he left some kind of mark on himself? Thinking of this, Zuyun was shocked and stopped suddenly. Li Emo asked in confusion, fellow Daoist Joe, you said you were afraid of trouble, and you stopped here, what do you mean? Zuyun hesitated for a moment and said, fellow Daoist Li, you go back to the sect first, I will meet you later. How can this be possible? Li Emo refused directly and said, you have no knowledge at all. If you encounter trouble, you don't know how to deal with it properly. I finally found you as an array master. If you die, how will I return to Liwo sect? Tell my dad. No, no, if you want to be late, then let's do it together, I have time anyway. Zuyun was filled with hatred, but he couldn't kill Li Emo. Although he was completely sure that he could directly blow Li Emo to smithereens, after entering Li Fire sect, he wanted to use Li Emo as his talisman. If he died, it would be several times more difficult to save Sun Suanhua. In desperation, Zuyun could only take one step at a time. If he really caught up with him during the pill formation period, he could only use the flying bow to escape, and then find an opportunity to counterattack. But in this situation, he had almost no strength to fight back. No matter how strong Chaos Palm is, it can't be strong. Then let's fly faster. Zuyun just wanted to get away from Scarlet Flame City as soon as possible. After all, in addition to the city guard, there was also a monk in the middle stage of pill formation waiting outside the city lord's mansion. What if he doesn't wait any longer and leaves this way? I'm so afraid of death. Li Emo curled his lips and then followed. He really didn't know what Zuyun was afraid of. But as soon as this thought came up, Li Mo's expression suddenly changed, and a white light flashed over Zuyun's shoulder. This white light soared into the sky, faintly revealing the aura of the pill formation stage. Damn it, did you really ask me to guess it correctly? Zuyun was also so anxious that he cursed because at this time, it was exactly the location that the city guard had just photographed. Fellow Daoist Joe, what do you mean? Li Emo was startled by Zuyun, and an inexplicable sense of crisis arose in his heart. What's the point? Just run away and I'll stop him for a while. Now, Zuyun had no choice but to think of a way to get away from Li Emo at the same time. There was no mark left on Li Emo. Fellow Daoist Joe, you actually. Li Emo was greatly moved. He thought Zuyun was buying time for him. He wanted to speak and stay, but when he saw the look of determination on Zhu Yun's face, he immediately gritted his teeth and said, "Fellow Daoist Joe, hold on for a while. I called my dad to come over." With that said, he quickly flew towards the ground. He's not stupid, he just doesn't have much experience. But Zhu Yun smiled bitterly. The limo people were not bad. After shaking his head, he gathered his spiritual power and flew in another direction. Scarlet Flame City is about 30 miles away from here. Even if the pill formation stage can find its own location, it will not be possible so quickly. Zhu Yun only needed to avoid Limo's sight before he could use his flying boat to escape. If there is a suitable location, he can naturally use the terrain to counterattack. But if not, at least you can hide in the Diwu glass mirror. After flying rapidly for a few breaths, Zhu Yun didn't know where Li Mo was hiding. Just when he was about to sacrifice the flying boat, a ghost-headed sword suddenly appeared out of thin air, and the blade exuded a penetrating red light. This red light seemed to be guided by the white light on Zhu Yun's shoulder. After flipping back and forth, he pointed the blade at his neck and chopped it down. The sword arrives before the person arrives? What kind of magical power is this? Zhu Yun gritted his teeth and hid in a very weird posture. But he never thought that the knife seemed to have intelligence. It missed the target, then suddenly turned around and pointed the blade at Zhu Yun's neck again. The red light exuded a chill, and it quickly enlarged in Zhu Yun's pupils. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 274. This knife is too fast. Zhu Yun suddenly remembered that the magic weapon used in the pill formation stage was a high-grade magic weapon. Just like Meng Hui's knife, there are many methods available, and there is even a hint of spirituality. It's no wonder that it can't be seen, this knife can attack so decisively. But this was not the time to marvel. Zhu Yun knew very well that as long as he reacted slower, he might be cut off by the knife at any time. He dodged the second attack of the knife very awkwardly and turned straight down towards the ground. It's not that he doesn't want to use the flying boat and escape, no matter how fast he is, even if it's 1/10 of his breath, he doesn't want to take the risk. As Zhu Yun turned sharply, the ghost head sword also flipped over, and then the blade turned downwards, chasing Zhu Yun straight after him. Feeling the extremely murderous aura coming from not far behind him, Zhu Yun did not dare to neglect at all, but he was rapidly thinking of countermeasures in his mind. This trouble must be solved before the city guards from that period of pill formation come. Otherwise, he will definitely die. Zhu Yun couldn't help but turned around and glanced at the knife, but a bright light flashed from the corner of his eye. It was the result of the pill forming period on the shoulder. This is the mark he left, and it seems that when the ghost head sword appeared, it was also beside this light. Perhaps the solution to the current problem lies in this mark. As long as this mark is removed, will the ghost head sword be unable to locate him? Thinking of this, Zhu Yun did not hesitate. While controlling the spirit sword under his feet to fly like a snake, he separated his mind and entered the fire spirit bead. Fen Tianyan, come out. At the command, a ball of flame suddenly appeared in his heart, and following Zhu Yun's instructions, it quickly rushed towards his right shoulder. Zhu Yun retracted his mind, and the ghost-headed sword swung back and forth according to his posture. This made Zhu Yun more certain that the light on his shoulders was the key. Whoops! Fen Tianyan suddenly jumped out from his shoulders, carrying the sound of rapid wind and hunting. The flames not only burned around the shoulders, but also branched out into lines of fire and began to wrap around the beam of light. Zhu Yun was overjoyed. He didn't expect Fen Tianyan to have an extra change. Originally, Fen Tianyan only had 3 forms, a palm-sized flame, a human-shaped flame that was half his height, and a sea of fire that was no different from ordinary fire. But at this time, Fen Tianyan made such a detailed attack, which surprised Zhu Yun. After the light was gradually entangled by the line of fire, it became dim at a speed visible to the naked eye. The ghost head sword behind him became swaying, as if he was drunk. As expected, Zuyun was overjoyed. As long as he solved the ghost-headed sword, he would get on the flying boat again and escape to heaven. As for finding Li Mo and rejoining him, Zuyun absolutely did not dare. What if we meet the city guard who comes here head-on? As Fen Tianyan slowly burned away the mark, the light gradually became imperceptible. It was more like the ghost head saber had lost its target and actually fell towards the ground. After all, it is a top-grade magic weapon. It would be a pity if it were lost like this. Zuyun rolled his eyes, and it happened that Fen Tianyan had received news that all the imprints had been burned, so he ordered it to return to the fire Lingzhu, and then he rushed towards the ghost head saber. More than 20 miles behind him, a look of surprise flashed across the city guard's face first, and he murmured, "This kid is not weak, he actually lost all the unique soul marks I left." But in an instant, he raised his brows again and showed a contemptuous smile, "Boy, if you don't pick up my natal magical weapon, I won't be able to find you. Are you worthy of taking my empty ghost sword?" As he said that, he moved and quickly chased Zuyun. But he didn't chase for long before he suddenly stopped, with a look of shock on his face. "Isn't this kid a late-stage foundation builder? How can he be so fast?" "No, you won't feel it after a while. If we catch up, is it possible that his spiritual power in the foundation building stage will be more than mine in the pill forming stage?" He had no idea that at this moment, Zuyun was sitting on the flying boat, holding his Kurgui sword. Zuyun didn't have any destination. He just wanted to find a place similar to a volcanic belt. He could use the terrain to either escape into the Diwu glazed mirror or use the land to fight back. This trip to the volcanic belt is nearly 1,000 miles, which is really too far. Not to mention the consumption of spiritual stones. If you fly in the sky for a long time, you may encounter other strong people who want to make a rebellion, which would be very bad. But from a high position, you can see a black and gray land, which is not much different from the Gobi Desert. It was all flat land, not even some small hills. It was naturally impossible for Zuyun to stay here, and he even left Li Mo behind, who was walking separately from him. "Fellow Daoist Joe, don't worry. When my father comes, I will go find you. Just hold on." A wisp of green smoke lingered between Li Mo's wrists, lingering for a long time. Just now, he used a talisman. It's not a transmission talisman, but a Zimu talisman. Li Mo is the child talisman, and the one on the other side of Li Tian is the mother talisman. As soon as the child talisman was destroyed, the mother talisman immediately sensed it. At this time, Li Tian sat up in shock from the sect master's palace. He had just fully recovered his spiritual power, and under the main hall, Li Yan's body had been fully exposed. Everyone was silent, startled by Li Tian's action. "Sect master, what's wrong?" the great elder asked in confusion. Li Tian was a stern person in Li Huo sect, and he had never behaved like this before. After the great elder asked the question, the others also looked over. Li Tian frowned, then said, "My son is in trouble, I have to go out." "Young sect master." The others suddenly realized how much Li Tian doted on his son, and the people in the sect knew it clearly. It was not surprising that there were treasures between father and son. But when did Li Mo, who had always practiced hard in the sect, leave the sect? They didn't know. Well, Li Tian nodded and said, "It has been confirmed that it was Li Yan at this time, but I still trouble you to look for clues on him to find out who killed him. I'll be back soon." After saying that, Li Tian's figure flashed and appeared outside the hall, and then flew away without any delay. The elders had their own thoughts in their hearts, but they didn't say much, but cast all their eyes on Li Yan. "He seems, without a storage bag." Suddenly, Li Ju exclaimed. He had originally gone to find Li Yan for his storage bag, but when he saw that his waist was empty, he couldn't help but shout. Everyone looked at his waist when they heard this, and the elder frowned and said, "Robbery." Everyone in the Luo sect knew that Li Yan was the richest. But he usually kept a low profile, and no one outside the Luo sect knew him at all. Not to mention, there were only a handful of people in the Jindan stage who came to the volcanic belt. None of them had noticed that anyone in the Jindan stage had come recently. "I'll check the cause of his death." The second elder was the only one present who knew a little about medicine. It was true that not long after Li Yan died, he was thrown into the volcanic belt by Zhu Yun, and the magma erupted, completely sealing him up. He squatted down and put his hand on his chest. After a moment, a murderous look flashed in his eyes. "There is the breath of the Luo curse on Li Yan." He stood up suddenly, and his eyes swept through everyone present. On paper, except for Li Ju, everyone can possibly kill Li Yan. Li Ju asked in confusion, "Second elder, Elder Yan also knows the fire curse. We can't just think that it was done by our own people from the fire sect based on the aura of the fire curse." The second elder turned his head and asked with narrowed eyes, "Are you questioning me?" Li Ju's heart skipped a beat, and his body took a step back uncontrollably. He shook his head and said, "I dare not, but what?" The second elder snorted coldly, "Li Yan has created a unique way to the fire curse and created the fire double dragon method. Door, I believe everyone present knows it, right? But he has two kinds of fire breath. In addition to his own fire double dragon breath, there is also a more pure fire dragon breath." When these words came out, the whole audience was in an uproar, and even the elder's eyes flashed with strange colors, saying, "Second elder, are you serious?" "Elder, if there is a lie, I, Li Yan Ran, will never be able to play with fire again in this life. For the cultivators of the fire sect, this is the most vicious curse. In this case, everyone present, except Li Ju, is suspected." The elder's face sank, and his right hand suddenly swung out, blasting Li Ju out of the sect master's hall, and then retracted his right hand, and the door of the sect master's hall automatically closed without wind. Keng. The wooden door made a sound of metal clashing, and everyone's face was gloomy. After a while, the smell of fireworks came out of the sect master's hall, all of which were different styles of fire. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzhuan Xianxia. Chapter 275. Are you going to revolt? Suddenly, the great elder stared angrily, his eyes revealing incomparable majesty. In the Luo sect, apart from Li Tian, the great elder has the highest strength and has reached the peak in the late stage of pill formation. Similarly, the second elder and the third elder are also in the late stage of pill formation. Don't dare. The great elder misunderstood. How is it possible to rebel? I'm just trying to see if my own Luo aura is the same as yours. Intimidated by the majesty of the great elder, everyone started to fight and at the same time disperse the fire in their hands. But everyone has a look of vigilance in their eyes, and they are all thinking in their hearts, you are the one who wants to rebel. However, I would never dare to say these words. Since it's not a rebellion, then we can all stay here and wait until the sect master comes back. Before that, no one is allowed to leave. The great elder said coldly. The rest of the people dared not speak out, so they found a corner and sat together in twos and threes, using their spiritual power to communicate and whisper. Being able to become an elder and being in the realm of forming pills, how could they not know what is going on in the sect? Li Tian is a relatively upright person. At least on the surface, he has never treated anyone badly. But because of this, the great elder also complained a lot, but he never told anyone, but everyone knew it. Cultivation competes for resources, and the great elder does not receive much more than the other elders. Compared with the sect leader, it was much less, so he was naturally dissatisfied. Everyone knew it, but no one thought that the second elder and the third elder actually wore the same pants as him. Even more so, at this time, taking advantage of Li Yan's incident and Li Tian's absence, he would take the opportunity to attack them. Waiting for Li Tian to come back is probably an excuse. He wants to use this opportunity to coerce and induce, and then eradicate the elders who are unwilling to obey. This is his real purpose, right? The elders are not fools, and the great elders are even less stupid. It also gives them time to think about it. Others didn't know, but he knew very well that Li Mo went to Xian City. How could there be no arrangement for sitting in the position of great elder within the sect? At this time, Zhu Yun was still in Fiazhu. He didn't wake up suddenly until he saw the rolling mountains in front of him. The mountains are the most suitable terrain for him. In the volcano, his methods were affected by the magma. Even after using the chaos palm, he had to be careful about falling into the magma and being burned to death. But in the mountains, he was not afraid at all. No matter what happens, you can hide in the Diwu glass mirror. Although he never saw anyone chasing after him, Zhu Yun could faintly feel a wave of spiritual power from the Kurgui sword in his hand. It seems that the city guard has been chasing him, but the speed of the flying boat is not so easy for Tang Zhuyang, who is at the peak of the late stage of the pill formation, to catch up, let alone a city guard who is only in the middle stage of the pill formation. Should we design to kill him first, or hide in the Diwu glass mirror? Zhu Yun controlled the whereabouts of the flying boat while thinking. But in an instant, he decided to hide in the Diwu glass mirror first. Just because I ran for so long without being caught up, if I were chasing someone, I would still be vigilant. If you suddenly find your own magical weapon in the mountains, you won't rush forward rashly. Thinking of this, Zhu Yun let the flying boat continue flying until he found a suitable mountain col, then he put the flying boat away and entered the Diwu glazed mirror. After appearing in the cave, he casually threw aside the ghost head saber and was about to start drawing the talisman. The role of the Firebird talisman is no longer so obvious to him, but after using it, it has the power of the Fire Phoenix talisman, and it can also be used as a means of attraction and containment. This is the reason why Zhu Yun bought more materials. At the same time, he wanted to give it a try now. If he used the pure fire power of the Fire Spirit Pearl to charge his spirit, would it be more powerful? After preparing all the materials, Zhu Yun began to make the talisman. The city guard who had been chasing Zhu Yun with all his strength saw no trace of anyone at all, but suddenly found that he had lost the sense of the Kurgui sword, and he couldn't help but be shocked. It's strange. Is this kid too fast and escaped my sensing range? Or did he hide my knife in some kind of outer space? He talked to himself, full of disbelief. Because no matter which one it was, he felt it was too incredible. In terms of speed, he could feel that Zhu Yun was always on the same level as him, neither faster nor slower. This was already a bit difficult for him to accept. You know, he is in the middle stage of pill formation, and he is only in the late stage of foundation establishment. What a world of difference! He kept chasing, thinking that if Zhu Yun's spiritual power or spiritual stones were exhausted, he could catch him alive and gain more. But he didn't expect that he would lose his sense of his natal magic weapon just like that. Could he be faster? The city guard couldn't help but think of the second point and shook his head again. My own empty ghost sword is a treasure formed by pills, and it has a little spirituality. Even if a normal storage bag is put in, he might still be able to sense it. Is it the Sumuru ring? The city guard frowned and denied directly, impossible. It is said that only the Yuanying ancestor can use the Sumuru ring. Otherwise the soul strength will never be enough to open it. Moreover, the Sumuru ring is not even common in the Peepa realm. In this case, there is only one possibility: the treasure that suddenly glowed on this kid's body is a space treasure. Thinking of this, the city guard's eyes lit up, and he decided to find Zhu Yun. If alive, I want to see the person; if dead, I want to see the body. He flew for a while, and his face suddenly became strange. "How did you get to the 10,000 mountains? How long have you been flying?" He instinctively retreated, but when he thought of the treasure on Zuyun, he gritted his teeth and said, "Treasures are sought in danger. There are only many monsters in the 10,000 mountains, and this place is just the periphery. There shouldn't be any powerful monsters." Thinking of this, the city guard fell down and took out a top-grade knife from the storage bag and held it in his hand. As a native of Chuzhu, the most widely circulated things in the 10,000 mountains are two things. One thing is that there are 10,000 monsters in one mountain. The deeper you go into the 10,000 mountains, the more and stronger the monsters are. The second thing that people talk about most is Yaoyong. It is said that Yaoyong came out of the 10,000 mountains, and with a lifelong magic weapon of unknown grade, he hammered out a world. Not only did he hammer Chuzhu, but he also hammered Yunzhou. He didn't know whether there was a hammer in Yezhu, but everyone knew that Yaoyong went to Peeper Realm from Yezhu. There are not only monsters in the Shiwen Mountains, but also evil spirits. Even that kid came to the Shiwen Mountains. Could it be that he is Yaoyong's descendant? The city guard muttered while tightening his breath, fearing that he would be discovered by the monsters here. It's not that he is afraid of monsters. But he is afraid that after killing the monsters, more monsters will be attracted. Although the monsters on the periphery are not powerful and will not threaten him. But in the Shiwen Mountains, the lower the level of the monsters, the more bloodthirsty they are. The slightest smell of blood is very bad. The city guard walked into the mountain cautiously. He didn't dare to use his spiritual sense. He could only keep turning his head to not miss any corner where people might hide. And Zuyun stopped writing after drawing 50 Firebird talismans. At this time, he was filling the talismans with spirit. Not knowing how much fire spirit power the fire spirit pearl absorbed at that time, Zuyun was more and more frightened the more he used it. Unlike before, he could not charge a few Firebird talismans with almost his entire danshan. Sometimes, in order to improve efficiency and seize the opportunity, he had to consume spirit stones to recover. Now, this fire spirit pearl has turned into a source of spiritual power, continuously filling up the Firebird talismans. Until all the talismans were formed, Zuyun did not feel a bit tired. He touched his chin and said with great satisfaction, "It seems that I have to draw more Firebird talismans in the future. Moreover, when the things in Yao Realm are resolved and I break through to the Jindan stage, I have to go to Peeper Realm and get the Wood Spirit Pearl from the Wood Spirit Holy Mountain." After pinching the time, Zuyun found that it didn't take an hour in total, and the efficiency was greatly improved. Converted to the outside world, it would be more than an incense stick at most. It's too early to go out now. It's better to study the 5 elements exorcist formation. Maybe it will give me a deeper understanding of the 5 elements Chaos Sutra. As soon as he said it, Zuyun walked out of the cave and took out 5 spirit stones and threw them out. He had memorized the key points of the formation. The only difference was how to set up the formation faster and more accurately. This requires constant practice, so that practice makes perfect. There is no shortcut to the formation. In addition to innate understanding, it is necessary to practice constantly. Zuyun has never thought that he is a talented person. Even today, he still thinks that his 5 spiritual roots are useless spiritual roots. It's just that the time flow rate difference of the Dao glass mirror allows him to spend several times more time than others to practice. As for other aspects, it is the willingness to use his brain, and then there is the immortal fate that Tang Zhuyang said. But the one who has the greatest influence on him now is Yaoyong. If no spiritual roots can cultivate such magical powers, he can definitely do it with 5 spiritual roots. Zuyun threw 5 spirit stones repeatedly, trying to keep the distance between them equal. Throw, collect, throw, collect. Zuyun practiced such boring exercises for 7 days without realizing it. Only when he could throw them accurately every time did he show a satisfied smile on his face. Next, he started to set up the formation. Zuyun released his spiritual consciousness, divided it into 5, and locked it on 5 formation eyes. 5 elements exorcist formation. As the voice fell, the light in the formation eye lit up, but Zuyun's pupils shrank. When the 5 formation patterns were connected, the spiritual power suddenly surged in the air, and then a huge momentum surged continuously. This formation is going to explode. He didn't think much about it at all, and with the thought, he flashed away from a glass mirror without hesitation. At this time, the 5 spirit stones exploded at the same time with a bang. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 276. It was just 5 spiritual stones that self-destruct. Why was the noise so loud? Zuyun was still frightened. He naturally understood how much spiritual power was contained in a spiritual stone. But the momentum he just noticed seemed to be 50. You know, at his current state, the spiritual power of 50 spiritual stones is enough to fill his danshan. This was equivalent to a late-stage foundation building monk exploding in front of him. It should be the bonus of the formation. It seems that there is something mysterious about this that Tang Tiangang didn't tell me. Zuyun thought, then turned around and looked around. He didn't know that this was the 100,000 mountains, and he didn't know that the city guard was worried that he would be discovered by the monsters, so he did not release his spiritual consciousness. This made him feel even more strange. Why? The city guard hasn't come after him yet. No matter, the explosion inside should be finished by now. Go back and take a look. Zuyun returned to the glazed mirror. After coming out of the cave, he was surprised at first, and then looked overjoyed. Except for the spirit stone dregs all over the ground, the space inside the mirror was not affected in any way. That's right, this is an immortal treasure, and the level of spiritual power is still quite low. Zuyun was excited, but his eyes fell towards the medicine garden. I saw that all the elixirs that had become spirits were hiding, looking frightened, which made me feel extremely funny. If the spiritual power is not affected, it must be because the sound is too loud. Zuyun decided to continue studying the 5 elements exorcism array. After throwing out the 5 spiritual stones, he did not rush to activate the array directly. Instead, he sat down and thought about the previous problem, which was the color of the 5 array patterns. What Tang Tiangang used was the 5 types of metal, wood, earth, water, and fire arranged in sequence. After entering the body and merging, it was exactly the same color as the chaotic spiritual power, and then it entered the Zi mansion. He clearly remembered that after he activated the formation, the colors of the 5 spiritual powers were almost the same, and the explosion occurred after the fusion. Just thinking about it, Zuyun immediately understood that he had not achieved the balance between spiritual powers, so that was why he was like this. He also understood why Tang Tiangang taught him the 5 elements exorcism formation so easily. It was because he felt that no matter how knowledgeable Zuyun was, he would not be able to use this formation. He has no spiritual roots, so the attributes of spiritual power cannot affect him at all. To him, these spiritual powers are like spiritual powers without attributes. But not myself. Thinking of this, Zuyun grinned and immediately found a solution. Isn't it just about balance? I only use spiritual stones to set up the formation eyes, and can I output the spiritual power myself? After saying that, he concentrated, and the chaotic spiritual power in his danshan quickly surged into his palms. Then, he stretched out his 5 fingers, and 5 spiritual powers with different attributes appeared on his fingertips. Chaos spiritual power can be transformed into any kind of spiritual power, which is not a problem for Zuyun. The difficulty lies in the fact that he needs to expend a lot of energy to control the 5 spiritual powers respectively. The 5 colors only stayed on Zuyun's fingertips for a few breaths before quickly disintegrating. Zuyun saw this and sighed, "We have found a way, but unfortunately the control is not strong enough, but, if it is really successful, this 5 elements exorcism array will be different. I don't know what kind of effect it can produce." He sighed, but Zuyun seemed to have opened up a new world of cultivation. After taking a short rest, he began to let the chaotic spiritual power transform into 5 kinds at the same time. Gradually, he forgot the original intention of doing this and devoted himself wholeheartedly to the practice of controlling spiritual power. The consumption of spiritual power is very small, but the consumption of mental energy is more than 10 times. Before all the spiritual power in Yudanshan was used up, Zuyun felt that his head was extremely dizzy, as if countless liquid lead had been poured into Zifu, making it almost impossible for him to lift his head. The harvest is there, but very little. The time it takes to control the spiritual power from dissipating has changed from 1 breath to 10 breaths. The control over spiritual power should be related to the strength of the soul. But only in the elixir formation stage, the strength of the soul will be greatly enhanced, and you can do whatever you want. Am I too impatient? And the only way I can increase the strength of my soul is to use the soul control pill. But this is not a magical elixir that specifically warms the soul, and the gain outweighs the loss. It's better to put aside this kind of control training for a while. Even if you master it, you still don't know what the effect will be if you use the 5 elements exorcist array. Sitting cross-legged on the ground exhausted, Zuyun began to reflect, and he actually found a wonderful use of the 5 elements exorcism array. Zuyun was overjoyed, but he didn't plan to test it, because his soul was too exhausted at this time. If he was careless and failed to react in time, he would be affected. He would wait until he recovered before making any plans. Thinking of this, Zuyun slowly stood up, walked into the cave, reached the edge of the stone bed, and lay down directly. After just a few breaths, there was a slight snore. The monks don't need to sleep, which is enough to show how tired Zuyun is. When he woke up, Zuyun was surprised to find that he had slept for more than half a month. Oh my God, this. Zuyun, who felt that his mind was very clear, was also full of surprise, and then he smiled bitterly and said, "It seems that if there is no corresponding elixir next time, I still won't be able to practice the method of controlling spiritual power for a long time. No wonder, pill formation under this period, there is no technique to enhance the strength of the soul." Coming off the stone bed, Zuyun happened to see the Kurgui sword thrown aside. The empty ghost sword that was not under control had long lost its red light and was like a dead object. If my idea can be successfully tested, even if the city guard comes, it will be enough for him to drink a pot. Putting his spiritual sense through the storage bag, there were more than 800 spiritual stones in it. After touching his chin, Zuyun decided to test his idea. With a knife in hand, Zuyun came to the pasture. The pasture is large, and he is not afraid of scaring Zhao Kamang and the others. Away from the lake, Zuyun flew all the way. After feeling that the distance was about the same, he threw the knife aside, then took out 5 spiritual stones and threw them out. Then, he unearthed a medium-grade magic weapon from Li Yan's storage bag. "Here we go." He cheered up and silently recited the formula of the 5 elements exorcism array. The moment the array pattern flashed by, Zuyun immediately used the spiritual power of chaos to drive his immortality technique footwork and escaped far away. Just after running a mile away, there was an extremely crazy surge of spiritual power behind him. Run. Zuyun was horrified. He never imagined that the formation explosion would produce such terrifying power. He thought he could escape outside the safe area and see how destructive the formation could be. But at this moment, it seems that I am still too naive. Boom. Just when the explosion of the 5 elements exorcist array reached his ears, Zuyun had already left the ranch. In the courtyard of the wooden house, he heard the frantic beating of his heart. It's too scary. It's too weak and limits my imagination. He touched his chest vigorously and couldn't help but mutter to himself. This was not the only time he had escaped death, but this time, he was so frightened that he broke into a cold sweat. After wiping his sweat, Zuyun looked at the open space next to the medicine garden with a strange expression. It was exploded like this before, but no traces were left on the ground, which is enough to show that this space is stable. It is indeed a fairy treasure. No wonder those elixirs were frightened. After shaking his head, Zuyun entered the pasture again to see how big the noise was. When he arrived at his destination, he saw a huge pothole with a diameter of 100 steps. Zuyun couldn't help but fell into deep thought with excitement. After a long while, he murmured, "It's too scary. 5 spiritual stones have such great power. If I lay out dozens of them and then activate them at once, no matter how strong the city guard is, they will be reduced to rubbish by me. Although the layout of the formation is still the same, the uses are completely different, so I might as well give you a name, 5 elements self-destruction formation." Thinking of this, Zuyun showed a wicked smile, as if he had seen the miserable situation of the city guard. It's not difficult to set up the formation, but the difficulty is how to make dozens of formations explode at the same time. With the speed of the pill formation stage, he can definitely escape from the range of the spiritual power. Then all Zuyun has to do is to make it impossible for him to escape. As a result, the formations need to be driven by the spirit guiding array. And I definitely can't stay at the scene, otherwise he will die with me, and I will suffer a big loss. Zuyun began to think in his mind and soon came up with a countermeasure. All it takes is the empty ghost sword to allow the city guard to walk into the 5 elements self-destruction formation. At the same time, he uses the Kurgui sword as the guide for the formation. He only needs to pick up the Kurgui sword to activate the spirit guiding array, and then the spirit guiding array can drive out the souls of the 5 elements self-destruction formation. Soon, Zuyun had a perfect plan in his mind. Then the next step is to start implementing it. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 277. Zuyun threw the empty ghost blade into the cave, and left the Dao glass mirror to start arranging the formation. He first laid out a spirit-inducing formation, and then arranged 30 self-destructing formations with the spirit-inducing formation as the center. This cost him nearly 200 spirit stones. But if the city guard can be blown to death, these spirit stones are nothing at all. After repeatedly checking that the self-destructing formation and the spirit-inducing formation have all formed a connection, Zuyun took out the empty ghost blade and placed it on the main formation eye of the spirit-inducing formation. After his arrangement, as long as the empty ghost blade leaves the main formation eye, it will immediately drive the spirit-inducing formation, thereby driving all the self-destructing formations. When all this was done, a full hour had passed. Zuyun didn't know how much noise this explosion would cause. He swallowed a breath-retaining pill, took out the flying boat, and fled to a low cliff 10 miles away. With the cover of the rocks above his head, as long as the city guard didn't scan it with his spiritual sense, he would never be able to find him. But even if he used his spiritual sense, he might not recognize him even though he had already concealed his breath to the initial stage of foundation building. When Zuyun took out the empty ghost blade from the Dao glass mirror, the city guard who was walking slowly on the other side immediately sensed it. He focused his mind slightly, the empty ghost blade suddenly appeared, and its position did not move. Could it be that the boy hid himself self-righteously? After thinking for a moment, the city guard decided to fly over to take a look. He could not be sure whether he was close to the sensing distance or Zuyun took out his empty ghost blade from another space. But no matter what, it was worth it for him to risk being discovered by the monsters in the mountains and solve this matter as soon as possible. The city guard surged with spiritual power and soared into the air. It would not take much time for him to cover a distance of about 20 miles. Soon, he flew over the empty ghost blade. My weapon is a top-grade magic weapon, but it was thrown on the ground like this. Seeing that the Kurgui sword, which he regarded as a treasure, was lying on the dust, the city guard was furious, and he even ignored the array I made by Zuyun with some spiritual stones. Although Zuyun deliberately covered the spiritual stones with the mud in the mountains, he could find clues with his spiritual sense at the stage of Jindan. In fact, although he flew here, he was still somewhat afraid of the beast tide of the 100,000 mountains. After observing the surroundings with his naked eyes, the city guard was relieved. This is a flat open space with a clear view. There is no place to hide. Go down and see if this kid has abandoned the sword here, or has other calculations. The city guard was cautious, but still underestimated Zuyun. He subconsciously thought that even he did not dare to release too much spiritual energy, so Zuyun should be even more afraid. This is the 100,000 mountains. How could he have imagined that Zuyun was not a Chezhu cultivator at all? The city guard quickly landed beside the empty ghost knife, and seeing that there was still no movement around, and there was no spiritual power surging or sneak attack, he controlled the empty ghost knife to fly back to his hand. And the spirit-inducing array also moved at this time. A pattern flashed by inadvertently, which immediately aroused the city guard's vigilance. Is there spiritual power? His heart tightened, and he looked around, but he didn't find that the pattern was radiating from the ground, and along the ground, activating one self-destruct array after another. Just when he was a little confused, 30 self-destruct arrays in all directions, a full 150 spirit stones, almost emitted light at the same time. There is a trap. The city guard frowned and shouted in a low voice. He had contempt for Zuyun. Even though the change suddenly occurred at this time, he didn't take it all to heart. Moreover, after his spiritual consciousness emerged at this time, he found that the source of these lights was just an ordinary spiritual consciousness. What does this mean? Want to attract the beast tide through spiritual power? That's too fantastic. The spiritual consciousness was arranged so neatly, obviously by Zuyun, and he couldn't help but smile. But soon, as the 5 spiritual stones closest to him gathered together, his smile froze instantly. Boom! Beside him, the first self-destruct array exploded quickly, and the majestic spiritual power rushed towards him frantically. The ground was covered with flying sand and stones, and dust and smoke quickly enveloped him. What kind of magical power is this? The city guard did not think of escaping, but hurriedly used defensive spells, but the spiritual power of the first self-destruct array was still raging, and the second self-destruct array also exploded. Then, the third, the fourth, followed one after another. Damn it! The city guard's face was extremely ugly. He felt that the blood in his body was aroused by the momentum of the self-destruction and kept surging. He had a bad feeling. Boom boom boom. The explosions continued, the ground shook continuously, dust was raised, and a huge grey cloud was formed and rushed into the sky. Not only that, the city guard also felt that his feet began to become loose and he could not stand firmly. He wanted to fly away, but at this time he was fully focused on resisting the crazy spiritual power from the explosion, and he could not spare the mind to take off. He had the will, but not the strength. As the formations exploded one by one, waves of spiritual power surged like a storm on the sea. One wave has not settled, another wave rises, and he is like a small boat in the center of the sea, which may sink at any time. Zuyun surrounded the 30 self-destruct formations around the spirit-inducing formation. Even if his defense was strong, he could not withstand this terrifying and superimposed power. Finally, when the 25th wave of explosion power came, his spiritual power could no longer be sustained, and the defensive power protecting his body broke layer by layer. No matter how strong he was in the pill formation stage, he still couldn't face this level of power. The city guard was instantly knocked to the ground and couldn't stand up at all. Because of this, the ground began to dent, and a huge pothole appeared. Until all the formations self-destruct, the spiritual power began to dissipate, and when the surrounding area became calm, he was already dying. Damn. He was lying at the bottom of the pit, dying. There was no spiritual power in his dantian, making it impossible for him to even escape from his body with the golden elixir. Far away. After Zuyun heard that the movement was gone, he suddenly jumped out of his hiding place. I don't know if I've been hit, but I still have to use the flying boat to go there and see. Zuyun was unsure. Although the movement just now was very loud, he could feel the power even though he was 10 miles away. If the city guard was hit, he would be crippled even if he didn't die. But there is another possibility, that is, the city guard discovered his arrangement in advance and took it. The knife quickly escaped. At the speed of the Dan formation stage, if it first soars straight into the sky and then turns and flies away, it might actually be possible. Although Zuyun thought that setting up the series of self-destruction formations was extremely appropriate, there were exceptions to everything. If the city guard is not removed, it will be difficult for him to leave the fire sect next. The speed of the flying boat was extremely fast, and it didn't take long to arrive at a place 10 miles away. Looking at the devastated ground with no flat spots at all, he was extremely frightened. In the pasture, he almost felt the power of this formation personally, and also saw the huge pothole. But what I saw at this time was that the crater blasted by 30 self-destruction formations was like a bottomless abyss. I don't know if he was killed in the explosion or if he escaped. Let's find him and let's talk. Zuyun let the flying boat descend slowly and flew towards the pit, while using his spiritual sense to explore the location of the city guard. But just as the flying boat fell into the pothole, a loud rumble came from the ground. Even the sound echoed through the mountains, layer upon layer, and continued to reach Zuyun's ears. This is... Zuyun was stunned for a moment, then raised his head to look at the high ground in the distance, and his expression suddenly changed. This place was originally a flat land between valleys, surrounded by low hills. But now, all the low hills are filled with monsters. There are all kinds of things, densely packed, and the demon heads are moving around. I don't know if it was caused by the self-destruction formation just now. Tide of beasts. Zuyun was horrified. The tragic situation he experienced in Xian City at that time appeared in his mind. How could he dare to stay here any longer? But he was afraid that there were birds and monsters in the air, so he didn't dare to take off. He simply used the flying boat to make a sharp turn and fall towards the bottom of the pit. You're really here and you're not dead yet. As soon as he landed at the bottom, Zuyun saw the city guard who was still holding the Kurgui sword in his hand. His chest was still rising and falling, and his heart tightened. Without hesitation, he gathered all his spiritual power and directly used the chaos palm. Boom! The city guard was unable to escape. He was lying at the bottom of the pit like a wooden stake that could not move, and was directly blasted into dregs by the chaos palm. At the same time, the force of the palm not only caused the pothole to vibrate, but also drove the pothole to a depth of more than 10 feet underground. Looking at the pit that was starting to collapse, and the gradual running and roaring sounds of monsters, Zuyun didn't have time to think too much, and fell directly towards the bottom. Above his head, dirt kept falling, and Zuyunshan was afraid that monsters would rush down, and before he could reach the bottom of the pit, he would enter the Dao-glazed mirror. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 278. What kind of place is this? How come there are so many monsters? It looks scarier than the ones in Scarlet Flame City. Sitting on the stone bed in the cave, Zuyun couldn't help but roll his eyes. However, it is better to have monsters than people, otherwise I would not dare to enter the Dewu glazed mirror so easily. After calming down, Zuyun wanted to wait for those monsters to disperse. He didn't know when it would be. For a while, he had nothing to do, so he simply decided to restore his spiritual power first, and then practice the control of the chaotic spiritual power into the 5 spiritual powers. Force. But this time he made up his mind not to overdo it, lest he have to sleep for a long time before waking up. And outside of Shiwanda Mountain, 2 people stood on top of a huge fire cloud. It was the father and son Li Tian and Li Mo. You said that formation master friend might be here. Li Tian said expressionlessly. Dad, it's true. Not only is he an formation master, but he also deliberately lured him away when facing the Danja period chasing after him, so that I had a chance to hide. You must save him. Li Mo said anxiously after hearing the noise coming from the Shiwen mountain. He wasn't sure that Zuyun was chased here, but Li Tian said that there was the smell of Dan Dan flying in the air. But they had just arrived, and Li Tian didn't dare to go in rashly. This is 100,000 mountains. Tell me, how did he escape the pursuit of the core formation stage when he was only in the late stage of foundation establishment? It's been so long. Is he probably dead long ago? Li Tian looked at Li Mo and said seriously. Although he followed the aura all the way, Li Tian already regarded Zuyun as a dead person in his heart. If Li Mo hadn't insisted on seeing people in life and corpses in death, he would have gone back to Li Huo sect. Dad, the commotion here must be caused by him. Please go in and take a look. You are at the peak of the late stage of pill formation. Don't you dare to enter 100,000 mountains. In desperation, Li Mo used the provoking method, but it didn't work at all against Li Tian, who had lived for hundreds of years. But he is still his son after all. Li Tian sighed and said, Moer, do you know your friends? How long have you been out before you meet someone who dares to save his life? Dad told you before, don't talk to strangers. Have you remembered my advice? He could only change the topic deliberately, hoping that Li Mo would give up this plan. It's a pity that Li Mo truly regarded Zuyun as a friend. In other words, he has never met an outsider in Luo sect with whom he can really talk. Dad, fellow Daoist Joe is really a righteous man. If you don't save me, then I'll go in and take a look myself. Li Mo understood what Li Tian said, so he jumped directly from the fire cloud, sacrificed his own magical weapon, and rushed towards the 100,000 mountains. Li Tian frowned and originally thought about taking Li Mo back by force, but when he thought about it, he had already reached the peak of the late foundation building stage and could break through to the core forming stage at any time. If you remain obsessed with this matter, I'm afraid it will have an impact on your breakthrough. After thinking about it, Li Mo decided to follow him and take a look. But this time, he didn't plan to go with him, but let Li Mo face the difficulties in the mountains by himself, and then show up to take him away after he was at a loss. First, you can let go of the idea of giving up. The second is to let Li Mo experience the cruelty of the world of immortality and Shiwanda Mountain, which can be regarded as a kind of training. With this in mind, Li Tian used his unique magical power to hide his body shape and aura, and followed Li Mo from a distance. Dad must have suffered a lot from other people's mistakes before. Why don't you even have the most basic trust? Even if fellow Daoist Joe lied to me, what do you, a strong man with one foot in the nascent soul, have to fear? Li Mo complained as he flew in the direction of the sound. The tide of countless demonic beasts was so noisy that it was impossible for him to take the wrong direction. Until, he flew over a mountain and looked at the densely packed monster beasts below. He was so frightened that he almost fell off the fire cloud magical artifact. Unfortunately, there were not many birds and monsters outside the Shiwen mountain. There were only a dozen or so sparsely seen in the sky, and they were not of a high level, so they could not pose a threat to him at all. On the contrary, in the valley, the monsters were extremely frantic, and some even started to fight each other. He didn't know that these monsters were actually caused by Zhu Yun's bombardment of the city guard. The corpse of the city guard was blasted into a ball of blood foam. After the bloody air dissipated from the bottom of the pit, it aroused the bloody nature of these monsters. There are some monsters among them who are born to be deadly enemies and cannot squeeze into the potholes, so they naturally start fighting. Ordinary monsters usually rely on their bodies and supplemented by monster power to use instinctive magic. However, due to lack of intelligence, accidental injuries will always occur. As time went by, the beast tide turned into a chaotic fight, and there was no time to pay attention to Li Mo who had just flown here. Just watching blankly, Li Mo didn't notice even Li Tian stood beside him. Until these monster beasts were killed and the sky was dark and the earth was dark, the valleys and pits were filled with monster aura and limbs and arms were broken everywhere. Li Tianke calmly spoke. Moer, these monsters are born from human blood. Your friend should be dead. Really? Li Mo raised his head, his eyes bloodshot. Indeed, he slowly accepted the truth. Even if he was pursued during the pill formation stage, he could escape alive. But how to escape the beast tide? He personally experienced the horrific scene after the attack by the beast tide in Scarlet Flame City, and witnessing the killing of these monster beasts had a great impact on him. He felt that Zhu Yun died at the hands of the city guard, which was why the beast tide was attracted. Even if he ran away, he should have run away during the Dan formation period, and it couldn't be Zhu Yun. Dad, Li Mo wiped the corners of his eyes and said, I want to go back and practice in seclusion. Li Tian felt a little relieved when he heard the extremely firm tone. But suddenly, he frowned again and said, Moer, do you want to avenge him? Dad, he was my only friend. He died less than 12 hours after we met. I want to help him take revenge. Li Mo said expressionlessly. Li Tian originally wanted to stop him, but he also thought that it would help him break through to the core formation stage more easily. In that case, it would be better to wait until he breaks through before stopping him. Chasing from the place where they met all the way to Shiwanda Mountain, Li Mo had already told Li Tian everything about how he met Zhu Yun. Li Tian knew that the person who was chasing him was the city guard of Xian City. But Tang Tian Gang in Scarlet Flame City is not that easy to deal with. Let's go. Li Tian waved his hand, and Li Mo was controlled to fly onto his fire cloud magical artifact. But neither of them knew that after Li Tian left Li Huo sect, drastic changes had already taken place in the sect. No one knows what awaits them. The two of them turned their backs to the setting sun and flew towards the east, which was the direction of Li Huo sect. As the sky gradually darkened, Zhu Yun had been practicing in the Dao-glazed mirror for several days. Once Soul feels a little tired, he will go to the pasture to see Zhao Kamang and Ergu. As for Xiao Brown and Xiao Hui, he didn't pay much attention to them. These two are the same kind, and Zhu Yun thinks they can get along well. It wasn't until one day when the red candle beast came to the lake to drink water that Zhu Yun remembered that he had accepted this monster. The moment he saw Zhu Yun, the red candle beast knelt down directly. After being defeated by Zhu Yun, it was taken into the pasture again. It had no intention of resisting Zhu Yun at all. After entering the Diwu glazed mirror, its injuries have recovered by about 70%. Although the spiritual power here is rich, it is not of much help to the red candle beast. First, it is a monster. The second is that there is no fire spiritual power here at all, and he cannot absorb the demonic power converted into fire power for his own use. Ho ho ho. At this time, Zhao Kamang suddenly roared. Zhu Yun thought that Zhao Kamang was going to give the red candle beast a disgrace, so he turned around and wanted to scold him. Unexpectedly, Zhao Kamang stretched out a paw and wrote on the ground. It needs a demon pill or a place with earth vein fire to fully recover. Demai Huo Zuyun knew that he was talking about volcanoes. But the demon pill. This thing does exist, the outside world is full of monsters. But if I could handle it, would I still hide in here? After thinking about it, Zuyun felt that the time was almost up. The monsters would probably disperse if they couldn't find him. At worst, he would go inside and look for the lone monsters and get some for him. The strength of the red candle beast is not weak, and it is full of surrender. If he recovers, it can be regarded as his own help and means. Thinking of this, Zuyun decided to go out and take a look. Don't fight and get along. Zuyun gave a few instructions and left the ranch. Then he concentrated and held his breath before leaving the glazed mirror. But when he found himself being heavily pressed underneath by countless monster beast corpses, he didn't react at all for a moment. These monsters didn't retreat, but killed each other? So, what about the demon pill? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 279. When he thought of this, Zuyun was inexplicably excited. But after releasing his spiritual consciousness, he found that the corpses of the monsters above his head were simply countless. Zuyun was stunned. It was not that there was no way to get out. As long as he used spiritual power, he could definitely blast them out. But he was afraid of attracting monsters again. In addition, if there were other spells, he was afraid that these monster corpses and the monster pills would be destroyed directly. It's a bit difficult. After thinking about it, Zuyun returned to the Dao glass mirror and paced back and forth in the cave. Not to mention that the monster pill is useful for the red candle beast, it may also be useful for Zhao Kamang. Zhao Kamang is also a monster, and he also needs a monster pill for cultivation. But how to get out without damaging these monster pills has become the only problem at present. There is soil under my feet, wait, soil. Zuyun, who was talking to himself, suddenly had a bright eye. Didn't I practice the earth escape technique? How could I forget it? Although he had never used it, the 5 elements escape techniques were all the same, right? I had already cultivated the water escape technique and the fire escape technique to the 2nd level, so it shouldn't be difficult. Thinking of this, he was overjoyed, and then he took out the 5 elements escape technique, turned directly to the page of the earth escape technique, and began to cultivate the 2nd level. The 1st level was the same as other escape techniques, which first integrated with the surrounding environment. The 2nd level was to act in it. It took a whole day for Zuyun to leave the mirror space with satisfaction. He only silently recited the 2nd level formula, and he had already escaped several feet below. This valley is not small, I will escape further. Zuyun randomly chose a direction, used the earth escape technique several times in succession, and then flashed out from the back of a low slope, and then used the longevity technique to hurry over. Not long after, he saw a scene full of corpses. The pit was completely filled with corpses. In other places, there was a little space, and some yellow soil could be seen. How many monsters have come? Zuyun also took a breath of cold air, and after thinking for a moment, he simply summoned the red candle beast and Zhao Kamang together. Go find monster pills to eat by yourselves, I don't have time to help you pick up corpses. After waving his hand casually and giving the order, Zuyun sat down cross-legged, while the red candle beast and Zhao Kamang ran down madly with red eyes. It was not that they were stimulated by the smell of blood, but the instinct of the monsters told them that there were countless monster pills here, which could allow them to at least improve their realm. Zuyun was not surprised, sitting on the top of the mountain with his chin in his hand and thinking, it was still the same question, what kind of place is this, There are so many monsters. At the same time, Li Tian and his son gradually approached the Luo sect. Moer, something is wrong in the section. When he was about to enter the sect, Li Tian's eyes condensed and quickly controlled the fall of Huoyun. He was afraid that if he got any closer, he would be discovered by the people in the sect. "Dad, what's wrong?" Li Mo said in confusion. He didn't say a word on the way back to Luo sect with Li Tianfei. This was his first sentence. He mistakenly thought that Zuyun was dead, and put all his hatred on the city guard of Xian City. He held his breath and wanted to return to Luo sect to practice well, break through to the Jindan stage as soon as possible, and help Zuyun get revenge. But Li Tian actually told him that something was wrong in the sect. "It's very quiet, the atmosphere is a bit weird, even the disciples guarding the mountain gate are gone." After the fire cloud landed, Li Mo said calmly that he had been in charge of Luo sect for many years, and he set the rules. There was no one guarding the mountain gate. Either all the people in the sect died, or someone rebelled and didn't follow the rules. But for fear of affecting Li Mo, Li Tian did not tell him the truth, but said with a solemn face, "Moer, do you still remember the secret place that Dad took you to before?" Li Mo was stunned, and then nodded. When he was a child, he said he wanted to practice, so his father took him to the volcanic belt to play for a long time. Later he learned that this was to test his understanding of fire spiritual power. "You go there to practice for a while, and Dad will deal with the affairs of the sect and then find you, how about it?" Li Mo didn't think much about it. No one knew about that secret place except the two of them. After all, it's practice, as long as no one disturbs you, it doesn't matter where you are. Li Mo took out his fire cloud magical instrument, and when he was about to leave, Li Tian stopped him. "Wait, Dad will give you some practice resources, just use them." As he said, he took out some pills and spirit stones from his storage bag. Li Mo was not polite, this kind of situation was common before, and after taking it, he left directly. Until Li Mo's fire cloud disappeared from his eyes, Li Tian's eyes showed a murderous intent. At the same time, more than 10 figures suddenly flew out of the mountain gate and directly surrounded Li Tian. Are you going to rebel?" Li Tian narrowed his eyes, his tone was full of contempt. "Ha ha ha, master, you are the kings, princes, generals, and ministers. I have waited for you for more than 100 years, but you have suppressed your cultivation and you have not broken through. This makes it very difficult for us." The elder stepped forward with a smile and said. "Humph," Li Tian said disdainfully, "the Luo sect was founded by my Li family, and your surname Li was also given by my father. Why, now you want to seize my Li family's foundation?" "Li Tian," the elder said in a low voice, "you think that the Li family you care about is nothing in our eyes. As for the Luo sect, we have already discussed that it will be called Huoyun sect in the future. If you pass down the position of the sect master as soon as possible, we can also let you go to Peeper Realm to be a Yuanying ancestor with peace of mind. Unfortunately, you will never have another chance." At this point, Li Tian had guessed what the elder meant. It's a life and death struggle, there is no other choice. But he was a little puzzled, why did these people let Li Mo go? Looking at the speed they came here, it is impossible that they didn't find Li Mo. He narrowed his eyes, looked at everyone separately, and said, "Do you mean the same thing? I'll give you a chance, as long as you stay 10 feet away from the elder, wait for me to kill this beast, and I will forgive you for the past." When Li Tian's eyes went, some people lowered their heads and dared not look at him. But no one moved at all. "Ha ha ha, good, good. I didn't expect that there would be so many traitors in my Li family. I, Li Tian, believe that I have never let you down. In this case, there is nothing to say, let's fight." After the voice fell, Li Tian took a step forward with his right foot, and a blazing flame came out from the top of his head. In an instant, he had turned into a fireman. Li Tian, you are really shameless. You have never let us down? Then why are there so many sources of cultivation in the sect treasury, and you never share them equally with us? Even if it is not appropriate to share them equally, at least you have to share them according to the ranking. But how did you do it? The sect treasury is only open to you and your son. Even when Li Yan died, you took all the resources in his cave into the sect treasury, and we can't get a penny. Hearing the elder's question, Li Tian felt his heart twitch violently. Indeed, there are many resources in the sect treasury. But those are the assets that Liwo sect has accumulated over the years to deal with emergencies. Liwo sect has a big enemy in Chuzhu, and these are the capital for him to make a living. As for the cultivation resources for Li Mo, they have nothing to do with the sect treasury. They are all earned by him outside, but for convenience, they are all placed in the sect treasury. But obviously, the other elders believed the one-sided words of the elder, and he even knew that no matter how he explained, the elder had prepared a rebuttal. Judging from the reactions of the other elders, he has lost the hearts of the people. Fight! A trace of loneliness flashed in Li Tian's eyes, and then he waved his hand violently, and the fire rushed into the sky, and turned into a huge flame giant, stretched out a palm, and slapped the elder. 5th level of Liwo curse. Liwo turns into spirit. Be careful. Beside the elder, there were constant sounds of shock and anger, and they dodged. But in an instant, several Jindan stage fell down, and golden light burst out of their bodies, and the golden elixir flew towards the sect. Form a formation and surround him. The great elder also shouted, and the other elders came back to their senses, each using their own magical powers to besiege Li Tian. They are all in the Jindan stage, even if they are divided into the front, middle, and back, but the number of people is their confidence. The battle was extremely tragic. But Sun Suanhua, who was hiding in the 9 transformations and 9 Yang's formation, knew nothing and was still thinking about how to get out. Because many ordinary foundation building disciples were arranged in the cave. If there were only 3 or 5 people, I would have a way to escape. But these people are crazy, at least 50 people live in the cave. It's over now, I don't know when I will have a chance to get out. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzhuan Xianxia. Chapter 280. For 3 days and 3 nights, Red Candle Beast and Zhao Kamang collected all the demon pills. After Zuyun ordered them to practice in the pasture, they took out the middle-grade spiritual sword and headed in the direction of Liwo section fly away. He believed that Li Mo would call his father over, but he also believed that his father would forcefully take Li Mo back. After all, no normal person would think that they could escape. So Zuyun was no longer in a hurry. He didn't even think about using the flying boat. Instead, he flew at a normal speed with his spirit sword. He even hummed a tune and looked at the scenery below from time to time. After flying for more than 2 days, Zuyun first flew back to the volcanic belt. He had never been to Liwo sect, but he also knew that Liwo sect should be in the north of the mountainous fire belt. The volcanic belt that was once ravaged by magma has now returned to calm. Perhaps too much magma had erupted, and he was keenly aware that the fire power here had become a little lighter. But if it's deep inside the volcano, it shouldn't be a big problem. This time out, the spiritual power in the fire spirit bead was consumed a lot. To be on the safe side, Zuyun decided to replenish the spiritual power as much as possible, and also let the red candle beast be well raised in the volcano. After all, there may be nothing in the future. Opportunity. Zuyun found a volcano at random and flew straight over. Just as he was about to rush into the magma, a frantic fire power suddenly erupted from a depression in the volcano wall. Completely different from the fire element in magma, this is the Liwo curse. Zuyun screamed and quickly dodged in the air. At the same time, a stream of Liwo quickly condensed in his hand. The reason why he used Li Huo was because when he was killing Li Yan, he heard an unwilling roar, saying that he was from the Li Huo sect. This made Zhu Yun couldn't help but think that if he used Li Huo, even if the attacker didn't believe his identity, his thinking and reaction would be delayed for a while. Just when he was about to throw his Li Huo out, his spiritual consciousness locked onto a familiar aura. At the same time, the person who attacked him also recognized Zhu Yun. Fellow Daoist. Friendly Dao. The two said in unison, each dispersing the Li Huo in their hands. You are from my Li Huo sect. After 2 days of crazy hard training, Li Mo has improved a lot. Although he is excited that Zhu Yun is still alive, he is even more surprised that Zhu Yun can also use the Li Fire curse. Zhu Yun is not admitting it, nor is he denying it. Li Mo is the young master of Li Huo section. Although he doesn't know whether he can know all the disciples of Li Huo sect, Zhu Yun does not dare to take this risk. As for denying it, he knew very well that Li Mo's next question would stop him. Why did you know the Li Fire curse? It's better to take the initiative to explain now. The Li Huo curse was obtained by Zhu Yun from Yunzhou, and for some unknown reason, it was on the body of a rogue cultivator at that time. Thinking of this, Zhu Yun had an idea and said quickly, I picked up the Li Huo curse. At that time, an elder named Yan Lao was killed here. They took Yan Lao's storage bag and found that Li the fire spell was useless. I just threw it away, and I happened to pick it up. Li Mo suddenly had a strange expression on his face. He knew that Li Yan was dead. Even leaving Li Huo sect to go to Xian city was related to Li Yan's death. Then do you know where Elder Li Yan's body is? Li Mo asked. He wants to wait for Li Tian to come back to pick him up, but he doesn't know how long it will take. Sooner or later, the cultivation resources will be insufficient. If Li Yan's body could be found, he would have a legitimate reason to return to the sect. Presumably his father wouldn't blame him for being disobedient. Zhu Yun didn't know the body that he threw away himself, but he was hesitant to tell Li Mo. Why, isn't it convenient to say it? Li Mo didn't know what Zhu Yun was thinking, and thought he was worried about getting into trouble. He couldn't help but patted his chest and promised, fellow Daoist, don't worry, I'll just tell you it's the body I found. Hearing what Li Mo said, Zhu Yun was helpless and had no choice but to say, you come with me. I saw the position of the body at that time. I can't guarantee whether the body is still there. He saw with his own eyes that Li Yan's body was buried in magma, and thought it would be best if it was burned to ashes. If I had known earlier, I would have thrown Mu Kingzhen into the volcano that time, who would have come here to look for him. Next time you do something like this, be sure to dispose of the body. If that doesn't work, you can just put it in a storage bag and change places. Zhu Yun took Li Mo and flew out of the volcano one after another, and then found their location. Fellow Daoist, you said you were here. Li Mo was just naive and didn't have enough experience, but looking at the obvious traces of digging on the ground, he suspected that the body had been stolen. Yes, I did throw it, I saw someone throwing it here, and I also picked up the Li Huo spell here. Zhu Yun was also extremely shocked. Who has nothing to do after eating? Judging from the topography, Li Yan should be completely solidified in the volcanic rock and integrated with the ground. Someone has dug all this. Could it be the period of pill formation? Can his body be exchanged for spiritual stones? If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have used Chaos Palm to shoot down the city guard. Could it be that I have a big enemy from the Li Fire sect? Li Mo frowned and suddenly said in shock, no, fellow Taoist, we will talk about it later if we have anything to say. I will go back to the sect first and report this moment to my father. With that said, he controlled the fire cloud to fly towards Li Huo's zone. Don't worry, Zhu Yun said quickly, I'll go with you. Neither of them knew that something had happened in the Li Huo section. Zhu Yun was only thinking at this time, what if Li Mo was fine when he went there, but couldn't come back? How could he enter the Luo sect to save Sun Suanhua? In a hurry, he said this. Yes, yes, you see I'm so anxious. Li Mo forced a laugh and said, Daiojo, I'll take you to the section, just tell my father the news, and he will naturally come to deal with it. Then we'll sit down and talk about how you survived. Zuyun was happy in his heart, but his face didn't change, and said, that's a long story, let's go to the Luo sect quickly. He was also curious why Li Mo was here, but for now, he would go to the Luo sect first. Anyway, in such a big sect, it's impossible for anyone to believe that Li Yan was killed by me, right? Zuyun was extremely confident. For the first time, he experienced the benefits of being at a low level. But this kind of complacent mood disappeared after arriving at the Luo sect. When they were still a mile away from the mountain gate of Luo sect, Zuyun asked curiously, Dao Li, are there no disciples guarding the mountain gate of Luo sect? Li Mo was stunned and his eyes instantly looked at the mountain gate. In the past, he could fly directly to the main hall of the sect without going through the mountain gate. This time, he really didn't pay attention. Hearing Zuyun's words, he also saw this scene, and couldn't help but feel strange, and subconsciously stopped Huoyun. No, there are people guarding the mountain gate for 12 hours, and one person is replaced every 2 hours. Although Li Mo practiced hard, he knew the rules of the sect very well. Li Tian told him not to give people a handle in the sect, and the first thing he did was to let him memorize the sect rules. He even emphasized that if he violated it, he would be punished like ordinary disciples. Therefore, when he saw that no one was guarding the mountain gate, Li Mo also felt something was wrong. Zuyun, on the other hand, had much more experience than him, especially when he entered the Immortal Gate. It was a place like Lingjian sect that was rotten to the core. Dao Li, I'm afraid something is wrong with the Luo section. Do you have any way to contact your father? As he spoke, Zuyun also motioned Li Mo to land. I had it before, but now I don't. Li Mo frowned and followed Zuyun, deciding to land first and then walk closer. However, when they had only descended half of their altitude, a huge fire cloud suddenly emerged from the Luo sect and rushed straight towards the two of them. Someone is coming. The two said in unison, but their tone was completely different. Li Mo was even about to go up to them, but Zuyun suddenly grabbed him. It's coming fiercely, it's not easy to deal with, let's run. After saying that, he didn't care too much at this time. If he was a little slower, he would probably be burned to slag. With a flick of his sleeves, he sacrificed the flying boat, directly condensed his spiritual power, and forcibly threw Li Mo up. Daiojo, what are you doing? That's the Jew elder of the sect. Li Mo poked his head out of the boat and recognized it as Li Ju. What elder wine and elder water? I only know that there is murderous intent here. Zuyun's soul strength is stronger, and he is more experienced. Everyone in the mountain gate says that he is in the Jindan stage when he comes out. It seems that he wants to catch this young master. Maybe Li Tian has also come out? Is there also a struggle for power in this sect? Hearing Zuyun's call, Li Mo was at a loss. Murderous intent? Where did the murderous intent come from? I didn't feel it. Until a huge fire cloud in the shape of a wine gourd quickly enlarged in his pupils, he came back to his senses in fear. He didn't know whether there was murderous intent, but Li Ju dared to attack him. If he didn't run, he would die here. Fellow Daoist Joe, run. Li Mo shouted a few words, and the flying boat had already flown away from here quickly, and the wine-shaped fire cloud also fell into the air instantly. When the fire cloud dispersed, Li Ju's figure came out from it and chased madly from behind. In terms of experience in escape, Zuyun is several levels better than him.